Right. Always challenging to make sure we don't get a lag, but
Mhm.
I imagine by now we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Baines. I am the President and CEO of the NATO Association of Canada. We are a charitable NGO dedicated to informing Canadians about the value of security and the importance of NATO. Over the past few months, and certainly since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022, Canadians have understood at a greater pace and rate the importance of security to their well being and our way of life. Canada is not a country set apart from the rest of the globe. We are very much a part of it. And in fact, we have helped to found what has become the rules based international order developed since the end of the Second World War. And one of the greatest parts of that rules based international order is NATO. Founded in 1949 on some very simple ideas, but those ideas were hard won from the death and destruction of the First and Second World War. Specifically, the idea that collective security, defense through deterrence, can be the best way to maintain peace. And it's underlined by a simple rule and a simple agreement between Canada and our allies that an attack upon one is an attack upon all. Every time I reflect on this development, on the creation of NATO, it strikes how simple but how essential that idea is, that we will look after our friends and depend on them to look after us. Of course, at the base of that is the ability and the preparation to look after one another and the trust that's required to maintain that alliance. These are some very heavy and challenging burdens for us here in 2025, but through great relationships with our allies and friends across the sea, we can maintain this. And our ambassadors program, which today's discussion is a part of, is a wonderful way to explain that and to show it in the real aspects of our relationships, which maintain Canada's place in the world, which reflect our values and our interests. So today, of course, we have His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Canada. But before we get to a formal introduction of His Excellency, I just wanted to encourage everyone watching today to definitely subscribe to us on YouTube. We can always use some more attention, but also to consider becoming a part of our organization, joining us as a member of the NATO Association, and getting to join in on some conversations that are only available to members. In addition, of course, to following us on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. You'll always be a kind and welcome member of the NATO Association here in Canada. With that, I'll be pleased to hand it over to our three fine moderators, essential members of our team here at the NATO Association. Jeremy, Anastasia, and Salik, over to you, and can't wait to hear this conversation.
Thank you so much, Robert, for that powerful introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our diplomatic speaker series, exploring the partnership and collaboration with NATO allies and global partners in navigating today's complex and challenging security environment. My name is Salik Qureshi, and I'm the lead membership coordinator at the NATO Association of Canada.
And my name is Anastasia Dyachenko, and I am the lead engagement coordinator of the NATO Association of Canada.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Ofono, and I'm the Cybersecurity and Emerging Threats Program Editor of the NATO Association of Canada.
We are honored to be joined today by His Excellency Ambassador Lim Woongsoon, the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Canada. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us today. Before we invite the ambassador to deliver his opening remarks, I would like to briefly go over his biography with our audience. His Excellency began his diplomatic career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea in 1988. Over the course of his career, he has held numerous high-level positions both in Seoul and abroad, including serving as Principal Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Director of European Division 2, Director of Humanitarian Assistance Division, and the Deputy Director General for the North Korean Nuclear Affairs Bureau. He also served as the Director General for the Human Resources in 2014. His extensive overseas experiences, including postings in Vienna, Nairobi, Washington, D.C., Rome, Paris, Madrid, New York, and most recently as Deputy Chief of Mission and Political Minister at the Korean Embassy in Washington, D.C., he has held a lot of great experience, which we are so excited to unpack in today's conversation. Ambassador Lim also holds a Bachelor of Economics from Yonsei University in Seoul and was awarded the Order of Service Merit in 2013. Your Excellency, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and we invite you to begin with some opening remarks before we get to the moderated questions.
Okay. Derek, thank you so much for your very kind introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank the NATO Association of Canada for inviting me to speak today on the theme of Canada-Korea security partnership and also economic partnership. And I'm so honored to have the opportunity to engage with the members of the association and to think together about our bilateral relationship in the context of changing global dynamics. And I have been in this position for 2.5 years now, and I have met so many Canadians who have been involved in Korea-Canada relations, well, for decades. And they seem to have a unanimous view on where our relationship stands today. And I have heard so many people saying complimentary remarks like, well, our relationship has never been so close as now. And we have entered a golden age. And we are indeed at our best in our centuries-long relationship. And in the diplomatic circle, when you assess the relationship between the two countries, the most frequently used the indicators, the most reliable data are the flow of goods and the flow of money and the flow of people. And these indicators prove these complementary remarks to be true. And if you see the trade between Korea and Canada, our trade volume has more than doubled over the last 10 years. And if you see the flow of the money, flow of investment, then last year and the year before, for the 2 consecutive years, Canada has risen to Korea's number 4 largest investment destination on a yearly basis. And 10 years ago, Canada was the 14th largest destination for Korean investment. And back then, maybe no Korean would have imagined that in very near future, our investment into Canada would be bigger than our investment into our Asian neighbors like China and Vietnam and Indonesia. And lastly, well, the people-to-people exchange, there has been steady increase in the people-to-people exchange as well over the last 10 years. And if you see the growth of the number of direct flights between Korea and Canada, then you will be just marveled at the speed with which the Korean airline and Air Canada and WestJet, they have the increased direct flight between our two countries. So the scope of our bilateral relationship has significantly expanded. So we need a new partnership framework to hold its breadth and depth. So in order to meet this demand, our 2 previous leaders, when they met in September 2022, they have upgraded our bilateral relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. And as a follow-up, our 2 governments, for just the past 2.5 years, we have launched around 10 new dialogue platforms to enhance our cooperation on national security, energy security, climate security, and on other emerging issues as well. So this is the sort of the snapshot of where our relationship stands today. But in addition to the background presentation about NATO by Mr. Baines, President Baines, I'd like to just share my presentation about how Canada has helped the international community to build the current security order. And so I want to just remind you of the origins of the present international security architecture. As you know, today's security order was basically a response to two wars, the one war in Europe and the other in Asia. And in Europe, there was a collective determination not to repeat the unspeakable tragedy of the Second World War. So the United States, Canada, and European countries, they established NATO in 1949. But on the other side of Eurasia, just a few years after NATO was born, Korea signed the Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States to prevent the outbreak of another Korean War. And this Korea-US military alliance was preceded or followed by US bilateral military treaties with Japan and other countries in the region. So as a result, in Europe, today we have a collective security mechanism. And in Asia, we have what they call hub and spoke security mechanism. Hub, well, definitely means the United States, and spoke means the bilateral, the treaty, mutual defense treaty the United States has with Asian countries. So in Asia, where we have a hub and spoke system, and these two regional security mechanism has served as a backbone of the world's peace and prosperity for more than 7 decades now. And Canada, on its part, sent large number of troops to both the Second World War and to the Korean War. And after the war, well, as I said, Canada was a founding member of NATO. And even after since the end of the Korean War, Canada has never left the Korean Peninsula. So as we now reflect on our bilateral relationship from the perspective of NATO, Korea cooperation, Canada's contribution to peace and stability, well, both of Europe and Asia, well, you have contributed from the very start of the wars that led to the birth of the security order. It can be a very useful backdrop for our discussion today. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your opening remarks, and we will now move on to our questions. As a key global partner of NATO, South Korea has been expanding its cooperation in areas like cyber defense and emerging security challenges. With NATO increasing its focus on the Indo-Pacific, how does South Korea view its evolving role within this framework, and what opportunities exist for deeper collaboration between South Korea and NATO member states?
Well, the security of NATO member countries, well, it has remained NATO's primary focus, but NATO has also engaged in operations outside of the Euro-Atlantic region, including in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya. And Korea's partnership with NATO goes back to 2005, when Korea contributed to NATO's mission in Afghanistan through provincial reconstruction team for several years. And so my point is, we have already started partnership in 2005. And even before that, as I said, Canada, the United States, and 7 European countries, they fought alongside Korean soldiers during the Korean War. And they still participate in the UN command in Korea today. So, of course, this engagement with Korea has not been through the mandate of NATO, but this history of partnership make NATO's contribution to the Indo-Pacific region more accommodating to South Korea. And as you know, the recent the geopolitical dynamics, it has made the security in the Euro-Atlantic and the security in Indo-Pacific more intertwined than ever. So we have been invited to the NATO summit and NATO foreign ministers meeting and NATO defense ministers meeting, along with other what they call IP4 countries, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. And I'd like to note that our former president, his first international engagement after inauguration was the NATO summit in Madrid. And if we are invited this time again, then our new president, we are going to elect our new president on the 3rd of June. Then the NATO summit will be among his first international engagements as well. And back to your question, if you see Korea's Indo-Pacific strategies, then you will find that Korea and NATO, we share many goals and many strategic objectives, meaning that there are so many areas of cooperation we can do together. But as of now, our main focus is, as just mentioned, cyber defense, since in a traditional security cooperation, like sending military personnel to join the military exercise in the other area, or the training, the participation in the training program, due to the huge distance between Europe and South Korea, is not that cost effective. But in the cyber world, there is no issue of distance. So our focus as of now is to enhance our cooperation in the cyber defense and hybrid war and other, the emerging, the cooperation in other emerging technologies. So we have had the first high-level inaugural meeting with NATO last year. And this coming September, Seoul is going to host the Cyber Champions Summit, and it's going to provide the cooperation platform between the Euro-Atlantic countries and Indo-Pacific nations. And also we have already provided some information about North Korea's cyber attacks on South Korea to the NATO Cyber Defense Committee. So this flagship project, the cooperation on the cyber defense, it can be a very good start. And from here, by accumulating the cooperation between Seoul and NATO, where we can expand our cooperation further in the years to come. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for that response, Ambassador. The next question is, the cornerstone of South Korea's security is the Mutual Defense Treaty signed with the United States in 1953. Currently, over 20,000 US troops are stationed on the Korean Peninsula, serving as a significant deterrent against potential aggression. The Combined Forces Command, established in 1978, further solidifies this alliance by integrating US and South Korea in military planning and operations. However, as we see the US begin to pull back their involvement in global politics, how do you anticipate that this will affect security dynamics in the Korean Peninsula, and how can the Republic of Korea prepare for what could be a vital shift in the region's geopolitics?
Yes, the Korea-US alliance has remained very strong and is much more than just a political statement or legal obligations stipulated in the treaty paper. Our alliance, it is backed up by the more than 28,000 US military presence in South Korea. And we have, as you said, Korea-US Combined Forces Command, and it is known as the most effective and most integrated the war fighting commands, and we have several the large scale joint military exercise every year, and the largest U.S. overseas military base it is in South Korea. So it well symbolizes the strong commitment South Korea and the United States have to the defense of the South Korea. And I know that there are some talk about the need to change maybe the configuration and the operation of the U.S. military presence in the Indo-Pacific region. But there had been no indication of any weakening of the United States ironclad commitment to the defense of South Korea yet. And I believe in the face of the growing threat from North Korea, it's going to be the case for decades to come. But on the other hand, well, as I said, our military alliance with the United States, it has been the backbone of of our security, and it's going to be the case. But we have heavily invested in our military and in our defense industry for over last 70 years because we believe that when we have stronger military capabilities on our own, our alliance will be stronger. So as a result of our heavy investment for the last 70 years, last year, Korea was ranked as the fifth, number 5, the most powerful military force by the global firepower index of the United States. So my answer to your question is, well, like we have done for the last 70 years, we are trying to increase our own military capability. And we know that there is no substitute to Korea-US alliance, but we cannot just simply rely on that alliance. And there are so many complementary the mechanism to strengthen our bilateral military alliance with the United States. One of them is Korea, US, Japan, trilateral cooperation, and we have really achieved a lot for the last 3 years to strengthen the trilateral cooperation among our 3 countries. And the another complementary measure we have been working on is to expand the role of the UN command in South Korea, and Canada is a member to that UN command as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for touching on that key aspect of South Korea's military dynamics. I'd like to dive into another critical aspect that you previously touched on, and that is the defense budget. For the fiscal year of 2025, the South Korean government proposed a defense budget of 61 trillion won, marking a 3.6 increase from the previous year. Could you please walk us through the domestic policies and regulations that allow South Korea to maintain such a high but yet sustainable defense budget? And additionally, what lessons could be shared with Canadian officials to help improve our own defense spending?
Well, there is no regulation about the level of military spending in South Korea. But unlike many other countries, defense spending and high defense spending is not a highly controversial issue in South Korean politics. And our defense budget has consistently increased whether we have a conservative government, whether we had liberal government. There was a consistency in the increase in our defense spending, and it was possible since there was a bipartisan support and there was a broad public backing about the increase in our defense spending. And it is quite natural since we are facing the existential threat from North Korea, and North Korea still today, they allocate 36% of GDP to defense. And we are now spend 2.8% of our GDP for defense. So compared to 36%, the 2.8% is not that much. And we are surrounded by, we call it the 4 major powers, the China, Russia, and Japan. And if you see the defense spending of those 3 countries, then in absolute terms, their defense spending are much larger than that of South Korea. So as long as this security environment remains unchanged, then we won't have the luxury of reallocating our defense budget for economic or social needs. And my message to the Canadian friends, what will be the appropriate level of defense spending for Canada. It is something that should be decided by Canadians, considering the threat posed to Canada and also the level of engagement you want to have on the global stage. But my message to the Canadian friends is, in case of South Korea, a large portion of the defense spending, actually it should be seen as an investment, not just a waste of money. Since defense spending has a positive impact on the economic growth, where the defense industry, where it creates jobs, and also it strengthens the local supply chain. And also these days, our defense industry has become a major export sector. So several years ago, we usually have 2 billion or 3 billion export of our military equipment to the global market. But now that figure has surged to almost 20 billion US dollar per year. So that is another positive spillover effect of the investment in the defense industry. And also another advantage you can have is the most military technology has a civil application. I mean, the dual use technology. So if you develop the certain technology for the military use, then it can be applicable to the private sector as well. And not just the dual use technology, many dual use infrastructure, the roads, airports, and the networks, they can be used for both military and for your own economy.
Thank you for that answer, Ambassador. We now have a question that touches upon security a little bit further. So in light of recent intelligence reports indicating that North Korea has deployed troops and provided military assistance to Russia in its ongoing war on Ukraine, how does South Korea assess the broader implications of this development for regional and global security? Given the historical ties between Pyongyang and Moscow, as well as the growing strategic alignment between authoritarian regimes, what concerns does this raise for South Korea's national security and stability in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, North Korea has defied our wildest imagination numerous times, but North Korea's dispatch of more than 10,000 combat troops to Russia, it was shocking, even by the standard of North Korea's recent behavior. North Korea, they pose existential threat to South Korea, and they also destabilize the region, and they pose the threat to the international community as well by defying the non-proliferation regime, and they provide personnel and military technology to many rogue states. But the dispatch of such a huge number of combat troops, together with around 22,000 cargoes of the artillery shells and more than 100 ballistic missiles, it is something unprecedented. And also, this is the first time North Korea has engaged in a war in Europe. And this case shows that North Korea's threat, it has no limit. And the North Korean regime, they have no qualm about letting their young, innocent people die in an unjustified war. And also, Russia's military cooperation with North Korea is unacceptable in its own right. But Russia has a permanent seat in the UN Security Council resolution. And North Korea's military cooperation with Russia has violated so many UN Security Council resolutions, and Russia is a member of the UN Security Council, and they led the adoption of those resolutions. So they are supposed to play a role of guarantor of the UN Security Council resolution, but they are the one who violate so many UN Security Council resolutions, and very, very unfortunate development. So there is no doubt that there will be so many consequences of the North Korea's military cooperation with Russia in the Indo-Pacific and in Euro-Atlantic and on the global stage as well. And how much and for how long is going to depend on the level of cooperation between the two countries. And unfortunately, we have very scant information about it, but definitely North Korea's support will drag on the war in Ukraine further. And it has so many implications for South Korea. First, North Korea is trying to complete its nuclear and missile program, and they have some remaining technological hurdles to overcome to reach that stage. And we are very much concerned the possibility of Russia is providing those technologies to Russia, to North Korea. And the another concern we have is the North Korean soldiers in the battlefield in Ukraine. They are now gaining the real war experience, and particularly they are getting the experience in the drone war and in other forms of the modern war. So that is another the threatening factor for our security. And lastly, without having very effective sanction and pressure on North Korea, there is no way to resolve North Korea nuclear issue. But if Russia provides a backdoor for North Korea to evade sanction, then it's going to make our efforts to resolve North Korea nuclear issue much more difficult.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that insightful response. Now shifting gears to Canada and South Korea's relations. The inaugural Canada and the Republic of Korea Foreign and Defense Ministerial meeting in November last year, 2024, marked a significant milestone in bilateral relations, reflecting a shared commitment to maintaining stability in both the Indo-Pacific and beyond. As strategic partners, both nations have deepened military ties, increased intelligence sharing, and explored new avenues for joint defense initiatives. What do you think are the key drivers behind this growing security partnership, and how does it align with the broader geopolitical challenges faced by both countries? What role do multilateral frameworks such as NATO, the UN, and regional security initiatives play in shaping the future of Canada and South Korea's relations?
Okay, thank you. As I said, we have a long history of military cooperation, and still today, Canada sends more than a dozen soldiers to United Nations Command in South Korea. And now we have a Canadian Lieutenant General. His name is Derek McCauley as a deputy commander of the UNC. In fact, it was the former Canadian Chief of the Defense Staff, General Wayne Eyre, who became the first non-American deputy commander of the UNC. And Canada has also another operation in the region around the Korean Peninsula. It's named the Operation Neon. And under that operation, Canada dispatches the several frigates to monitor North Korea's illegal activities in the region. So we have a tradition of military cooperation, but still the launch of the Foreign and Defense Ministerial meeting, it was a milestone event in our relationship, not least because it was the third such dialogue mechanism for Korea after the United States and Australia. I believe it was the highest level, highest possible level of commitment Korea and Canada have demonstrated to our defense and security partnership. And about your question that what drove this high-level partnership is my view is that the first one is the return of geopolitics. There was a growing realization that our approach, that it was formed in the age of free trade and globalization, and that approach would not work any longer. And also the Russia war in Ukraine, it strengthened that realization. So that may be the first force to drive our high-level defense and security partnership. And the another force was our Indo-Pacific strategies. And Korea and Canada, we have released our Indo-Pacific strategies just 1 month apart. And we laid out like a common goals of defending the rule-based international order, and we saw one another as key partners in the Indo-Pacific region. So these Indo-Pacific strategies have driven the leaders of our two countries to start the high-level defense partnership. And on your last question, it's very difficult to answer how the United Nations and how the NATO cooperation would shape our bilateral relationship. But I would say we are pursuing the same goals, the strengthening of the rule-based international order, and we are just implementing our shared goals on a bilateral level and also in the regional cooperation mechanism and also on the global stage, such as the UN and NATO. And we are in the right position to work together because, as I said, we just share the common goals and interests. But we are also the middle powers, and we are open trading nations, and we are strong supporters of multilateralism. So if you see the voting patterns of Korea and Canada in the international institution, sometimes you'll find that Korea's position is closer to Canada's than other G7 members. That much we share the same interest on the global stage. And taking this opportunity, I want to just highlight that at the bilateral level, regional level, and global level, we have one more layer of our cooperation, and I would call it the North Pacific cooperation. And 10 countries and EU and ASEAN, they have released their own Indo-Pacific strategies. And Korea and Canada, we are the only ones who have the North Pacific as a subset of the Indo-Pacific. So we are now working on the partnership in the North Pacific. So usually when we describe our cooperation and our partnership, we like to say we're in the North Pacific and in the Indo-Pacific and beyond Pacific. So at every level, where we are now working together to safeguard the rule-based international order.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for touching on the bilateral relations. Still on bilateral relations, I'd like to segue into bilateral trade, something that you touched on quite a bit in your answer. The Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement, which came into force in 2015, has significantly boosted bilateral trade between the two nations, with trade volumes exceeding $18 billion in 2023. As both countries seek to strengthen their supply chain resilience, particularly in critical minerals, semiconductors, and green tech, how do you see Canada and South Korea expanding their economic cooperation in the coming years? What sectors hold the most promise for increased collaboration, and how can both nations work together to navigate growing global trade?
As I mentioned in my opening remarks, the speed with which our trade and investment has expanded was so impressive. But still, there are so many untapped potential. And last year, Canada sent Team Canada Trade Mission to Seoul and they had more than 700 business-to-business meetings in Seoul. And the Canadian officials, they informed me that number, the number of the business meetings they had in Seoul, it was the record number in the history of the Canada Trade Mission. And they think that number would not have been overcome for years to come. So it shows, well, we have still untapped potential in our economic relationship. Then which sector would be most promising in our future relations? Luckily, there was a report about that a few years ago. The Federation of Korean Industries and Business of Council of Canada, BCC, they have commissioned a group of experts to study our bilateral relationship and find the most promising sector in our future collaboration. And their answer was maple, not Canadian syrup. Maple is the collection of initials M, minerals, and A, AI, and P, policy coordination, and L, low carbon energy technology, and E is electric vehicle. So you know what? It represents the potential in the clean energy transition and the energy security. And if you see the investment map in Canada, the Korean companies' investment in Canada, you will find that so many projects are on the way across Canada, starting from LNG Canada in British Columbia. And Samsung is now working on hydro dam in British Columbia. And in Ontario, we are now building, Korean companies are building the electric vehicle battery plants, and they are working on solar and wind project. And in Quebec, three other the projects for electric vehicle battery plants, and PEI solar project, and in Newfoundland hydrogen and ammonia project. So that is the most promising part of our future collaboration. And I had a chance to talk with some Korean Canadian consultants, and they said these days they get so many inquiries from the Korean business people and Canadian business people, and their inquiries are centered around the hydrogen and ammonia and K-beauty and the bio. But I believe that some sectors, some strategic sectors, Korea has strengths like shipbuilding and nuclear energy and also defense industry. Well, in those areas where there are so much work we can do together as well.
Thank you for that insightful answer, Ambassador. As two nations committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2050, Canada and South Korea have been ramping up collaboration on clean technology, hydrogen energy, and critical mineral supply chains for electric vehicle production. This is something you already touched upon in your previous answer, but can you say a bit more on what specific initiatives are currently in place to accelerate this transition? And what role do private sector partnerships play in fostering innovation in sustainable clean energy solutions? Additionally, how can both countries balance economic competitiveness while also prioritizing energy security and maintaining their commitments to reducing global carbon emissions?
Yeah. Like Canada, Korea is strongly committed to achieving a net zero economy by 2050. And also we need to secure a stable supply of energy, and achieving a net zero economy and also a stable supply of energy is not something that, well, Korea can achieve on our own. We need a reliable partner, and we believe that Canada can be the ideal partner for South Korea's efforts to achieve these two goals. So we are now, well, we have launched many mechanisms at the government level. We have launched the ministerial dialogue mechanism on economic security 2 years ago. Our two foreign ministers and our two industry ministers, they met in Seoul to launch 2+2 dialogue on economic security. And in addition to that, we have also launched another dialogue on economic. We call it Economic Strategic Dialogue. And also we have signed MOU on critical minerals, and we have established a working group to explore the cooperation in the field of the critical minerals. And also we have launched the regular meeting of the climate ambassadors. So we are now creating the new platform for cooperation at the government level. But in addition to that, as I said, many Korean, the global companies, LG, Samsung, and SK, they are now working with the Canadian partners to start the clean energy projects across Canada. On your last question, achieving the net zero economy and securing the stable supply of energy, they are not compatible with being more competitive in the global market. Once you reach a certain level, then you can achieve three goals, where the very secure supply of energy and the low the low carbon energy technology, and still you can remain very competitive in the market. But the problem is in the initial stage of that investment, you need huge money and you are having high risk. So without strong support from the government, the private companies, they are very hesitant to jump in such a huge project. So we need to finance their huge project, and we need to reduce the risk. And so on that spirit, the EDC, Export Development Canada, the government agency to finance the huge the private investment, and its Korean counterparts, Korea Export Import Bank and the Korea Reinsurance Cooperation Agency, they have signed MOU, and they are now working on the list of the projects the Korea and Canada will finance for their investment in our two countries.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that insightful response. Focusing on the A in MAPLE, which you very well explained, with the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence and the increasing prevalence of cyber threats, Canada and South Korea have both emphasized the importance of digital security. As cyber warfare becomes a growing challenge in modern conflicts, what measures are being taken to strengthen cyber resilience? Are these specific areas where South Korea can build artificial intelligence or AI governance frameworks and protect critical infrastructure and address the ethical challenges posed by emerging technologies in national security and defense?
Well, we are number one target of North Korea's cyber attack, and you wouldn't believe that last year, South Korea's public institutions, they face an average of over 1.6 million cyber attack attempts per day. And we traced more than 60% of the cyber attacks into North Korea. So when it comes to cyber attack, no other country can be more concerned about its danger than South Korea. So we are very active, not only in strengthening our cyber defense system in South Korea, and also coordination with the other countries. It is very critical. As you know, there is a saying that a security chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So we should eradicate the weakest link. And it's done in two ways. The first one is the cooperation with other partner countries like Canada. And we have the capacity to deal with cyber attack, but we need policy coordination and we need information sharing. So that's the first part of the effort South Korean government is making. And the another part to eradicate the weakest link is that some countries, they don't have the capacity to deal with the cyber attack. So in that case, where we are providing the assistance, those countries, it's called capacity building program. So we are providing the assistance to those countries to increase their capacity building, the dealing with such cyber attacks. So that's the main effort South Korean government is making these days. And on the AI, we have hosted many international events, international conferences last year. We hosted the AI Summit, and we hosted the Summit on the Responsible AI in the military domain. And we are now trying to be a part of the like-minded countries to create AI governance. And as of now, our main focus is to have some guidance, particularly in the use of the AI in the military domain. And we have adopted, we motioned the UN Security Council resolution for the AI last year, UN General Assembly resolution, sorry, last year. So we are doubling up our efforts to create the AI governance system with our partner countries.
Thank you for taking us through that. You briefly touched on South Korea's involvement in global governance, and I'd like to take us back to that. And we can see a greater leadership role has been taken through South Korea's participation in the G20, APEC, and UN peacekeeping missions. As Canada and South Korea navigate an increasingly complicated geopolitical environment, how can we work together to reinforce multilateral institutions, promote democratic values, and uphold international law? With South Korea assuming the APEC chair in 2025 and Canada preparing to host G7 discussions, what shared priorities can be advanced through these leadership roles?
Yes, I know that there is a growing concern that the international system is in retreat these days. But I believe that despite these challenges we are facing today, there is no alternative system that better serves the interest of all nations, and particularly Korea and Canada. We are the one of the greatest beneficiaries of this international system. So, as a champion of the rule-based international order and the international institutions of today, where we should work together. And in that sense, very fortunate for Canada to be a president of G7, and Korea will host APEC summit at the end of this year. So we can coordinate our chairmanship. But I don't have the frankly specific idea how to recommit ourselves to the rule-based international order. But as a G7 chair and as a APEC president, when we work on like the joint statement and the separate statement on the issues of the day, then we should try to preserve the good part of the international system of today as much as possible. In the past, maybe the free trade and the rule-based international order and freedom and democracy and human rights, they may have just sounded diplomatic cliche. But these days, just having those strong wordings in the statement, it may mean a lot. And I'm sure that even though there are some skepticism in the diplomatic circle, whereby continuing the tradition of those strong commitments in the joint statement and separate statement, where we will keep the momentum going, and someday there will be a time for Korea and Canada and other members of the international community to be very comfortable with those wordings. And also, well, as you said, the AI and climate change and the cyber attack, that those are the issues that should be addressed in the international arena as well. And if we fail to address those issues, then there will be another skepticism about the effectiveness, about the legitimacy of the international institutions. So we should double up our efforts to respond to the need, to the issues of the day as well.
Thank you so much for that, Ambassador. We have one more question for today, and to end things off, we will touch upon the global influence of South Korean culture, spanning K-pop, cinema, and cuisine. And culture has positioned the country as a leader in cultural diplomacy, with over 220,000 Korean Canadians and a growing number of South Korean students choosing Canada for their education. What efforts are being made to further strengthen cultural and educational exchanges between our two nations? Additionally, how does cultural diplomacy fit into South Korea's broader foreign policy strategy, particularly in fostering deeper connections with allies like Canada?
I like to imagine Korea-Canada relationship as a car with four wheels and two front wheels. Maybe one wheel is a defense security partnership, and the other wheel in the front is a economic security partnership. And these two front wheels are driven by our common values and our common interest and our capacity to deliver it. And the real wheels is cultural exchange and the people-to-people ties, since the common value and common interest, that is something we have at the national level. But at the end of the day, the most important component of even the relationship between the countries is each and every individual. And if you see the relationship at the individual level, then mutual affinity and mutual understanding and the shared memories, they are the most important part in the relationship between the countries. So if you see the statement for comprehensive strategic partnership, then our two leaders, they laid out cultural cooperation and also the youth mobility program as the cores of the 5 shared priorities for our future relationship. And under that statement, we have signed the most youth mobility program, the MOU on youth mobility program. And also we have designated last year and this year as year of cultural exchanges. So at the government level, we are promoting the more young students and more people to explore the culture of the other countries. And also we have so many exhibitions and the cultural performance. And one of the focus of our embassy is to revive our shared history through many cultural events, so that we can pass down our shared history to our next generation. And one of them is the students of the University of Saskatchewan and the First Nation universities. They made collaborative musical with Korean students to revive the Canadian soldiers' participation during the Korean War, where they used to play the hockey game on the frozen river during the Korean War, and we have that story in the collaborative musical. And in addition to that, we also organized the sports event, the hockey match between the two regiments who participated during the Korean War. And we as a yearly event, we organize that hockey match. So one of the focuses of our embassy is to revive the stories, the shared stories of Korea and Canada, and have that element in the cultural event and pass it down to our next generation.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Unfortunately, it looks like that is all we have time for today. We would like to convey our sincerest thanks to you for agreeing to have this conversation and for your thoughtful responses. With that, I will now pass it on to our President and CEO of the NATO Association of Canada, Robert Baines, for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Anastasia, Salik, and Jeremy. What a great job moderating the conversation with Your Excellency. Thank you so much. I love it that we ended on a cultural note. That is something that we try to emphasize at the NATO Association, that so much of diplomacy, of maintaining our rules-based international order is just based on that simple relationship between people, the human element. And I just can't thank you enough for rounding that out, and also mentioning K-pop and its importance in our relationship. But yes, we hope to have many more occasions to work together in the future. The NATO Association is constantly putting on in-person events, of course, so hopefully we get to host you at one of those. But for all of those who are watching, thank you for listening to the conversation, and to please encourage you to just keep the conversation going. Follow us on social media, join us as a member, talk to your friends, your family, those people at your work, to remind them that security is part of what Canada does. That is what we're trying to do, is make a more secure, peaceful and prosperous country within a peaceful and prosperous world. Really, really very key for us. And thank you, Ambassador, for joining us for that great conversation. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Well, once again, thank you so much for giving me a chance to sharing my thought with the members of your association.
A pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the stream is done. We are no longer